Good afternoon. Welcome to Midday Prime. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. In the next 1 hour, we bring you all the stories and updates from India and the world. Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks on school education in the context of national education policy. He spoke on making learning fun, holistic, and not driven by marks and mark sheets. Also important development between India and China. Foreign ministers of the two countries agreed on early disengagement, not allowing differences to become disputes. All that and more. First, the big news at this hour. Prime Minister Modi addresses virtual conclave on transformational reforms in school education in the 21st century under National Education Policy 2020. Says the policy is a way to fulfill the new aspirations and hopes of New India. Prime Minister Modi says new education policy-based curriculum by 2022 stresses on fun, activity, discovery-based learning. Engage, explore, experience, express and excel should be the mantra of new age learning for children. PM Narendra Modi remembers 9/11 attack, says if only humankind had walked on the path of Acharya Vinoba Bhave and Swami Vivekanand, the destruction that happened would not have occurred. India and China reached consensus in the bilateral meeting between External Affairs Minister S. Shankar and Chinese FM Wang Yi in Moscow on the sidelines of the SCO summit. Both agreed to quickly disengage and expedite work towards new confidence-building measures. European Union condemns the UK government's unilateral decision to override the divorce deal as an extremely serious violation of the deal and international law. Also threatens trade sanctions against the country. Sports, South Africa on the verge of ICC ban as government takes over control due to decade-long maladministration in South African Cricket Committee. And at the US Open, Naomi Osaka books her berth in the final of women's singles with a hard-fought 3-set win over Jennifer Brady. Serena Williams to meet Victoria Azarenka in the other last four contest, which is billed as Battle of Supermoms. We begin the bulletin with the big news of the hour. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today addressed a virtual conclave on school education in the 21st century. Under National Education Policy 2020, also referred to as NEP 2020, through video conferencing. PM said the policy is a way to fulfill the new aspirations and hopes of New India. And Prime Minister Modi also said, engage, explore, experience, express and excel should be our mantra for new age learning for children.
हमें इसी तरह के आसान और नए नए तौर तरीकों को बढ़ाना होगा। हमारे ये प्रयोग न्यू एज लर्निंग का मूल मंत्र होना चाहिए। एंगेज, एक्सप्लोर, एक्सपीरियंस, एक्सप्रेस और एक्सेल, यानी कि स्टूडेंट्स अपने रुचि के हिसाब में गतिविधियों में, घटनाओं में, प्रोजेक्ट्स में एंगेज हो, इसे अपने हिसाब से एक्सप्लोर करें। इन गतिविधियों, घटनाओं, प्रोजेक्ट्स को विभिन्न दृष्टिकोण अपने एक्सपीरियंस से सीखें। ये उनका पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस हो सकता है या कोलैबोरेटिव एक्सपीरियंस हो सकता है। फिर बच्चे रचनात्मक तरीके से एक्सप्रेस करना सीखें। इन सब को मिलाकर ही फिर एक्सेल करने का रास्ता बनता है।
And PM Modi also said MyGov portal received more than 15 lakh suggestions from teachers on NEP implementation. just in a week, seeking their views and recommendations.
नई राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति भी नए भारत की नई उम्मीदों की नई आवश्यकताओं की पूर्ति का एक सशक्त माध्यम है। इसके पीछे पिछले 4-5 वर्षों की कड़ी मेहनत है। हर क्षेत्र, हर विद्या, हर भाषा के लोगों ने इस पर दिन रात काम किया है, लेकिन ये काम अभी पूरा नहीं हुआ है। शिक्षा मंत्रालय ने भी राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति को लागू करने के बारे में देश भर के टीचर से माय.गॉव पोर्टल पर उनके सुझाव मांगे थे। एक सप्ताह के भीतर ही 15 लाख से ज्यादा सुझाव मिले हैं।
And Prime Minister Modi said that the new education policy, the National Education Policy 2020, will sow seeds of starting a new era, will give a new direction to education in the 21st century.
आज हम सभी एक ऐसे क्षण का हिस्सा बन रहे हैं जो हमारे देश के भविष्य निर्माण की नींव डाल रहा है। एक ऐसा क्षण है जिसमें नए युग के निर्माण के बीज पड़े हैं। राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति 21वीं सदी के भारत को नई दिशा देने वाली है।
And PM said that while nothing has remained the same in the past 3 decades, India's education system had remained unchanged. This was critical to bring a new education policy.
पिछले 3 दशकों में दुनिया का हर क्षेत्र बदल गया, हर व्यवस्था बदल गई। इन 3 दशकों में हमारे जीवन का शायद ही कोई पक्ष हो जो पहले जैसा ही रहा हो, लेकिन वो मार्ग जिस पर चलते हुए समाज भविष्य की तरफ बढ़ता है, हमारी शिक्षा व्यवस्था वो अब भी पुराने ढर्रे पर ही चल रही थी। पुरानी शिक्षा व्यवस्था को बदलना उतना ही आवश्यक था जितना किसी खराब हुए ब्लैक बोर्ड को बदलना आवश्यक होता है।
And PM said the new curriculum framework will be developed and be ready by the year 2022 when the nation celebrates 75 years of independence, Prime Minister said addressing the school education conclave organized by Ministry of Education. Those were some of the highlights of what Prime Minister had to say. And now let us look at the key takeaways of Prime Minister's address on school education in the 21st century. We'll try and look at the key takeaways that Prime Minister talks about, the key highlights that Prime Minister had to share. Prime Minister on school education in the 21st century, PM says we have to equip our students with skills for the 21st century. 21st century is going to be driven by skills. What are those skills? Prime Minister also lists them very clearly. Critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, curiosity, communication. These are the skills that are going to drive students to their future irrespective of the subject of their study. Moving on, earlier education policy was restrictive. National Education Policy 2020 is liberating and flexible. A science student can study music, a commerce student can study physics alongside. A lot of flexibility is given to students. How? Making learning integrated, interdisciplinary and fun-based are the highlights, Prime Minister said, of the new policy. Reforms are also made in assessment. Mark sheets are going to be replaced by a more holistic form of report card where students, remember, if you look at the policy, will also be able to assess themselves. So self-assessment is going to be a crucial aspect. Moving on, language as a medium of education, not education by itself. An important point made by the Prime Minister when he's arguing for the use of mother tongue for primary education. PM says students should be taught in language they can easily understand, especially as far as primary education is concerned. In that manner, students are also exposed to the linguistic diversity. But also talking about skills, exposing students to diversity of Indian craftsmen. Vocational education would be introduced to students at a young age. They'll be able to go see a carpenter, electrician work and also learn primary skills from them. Prime Minister spoke about the importance of promoting mathematical and scientific temper, not just as subjects, but an attitude towards life and learning. So that sort of a temperament, scientific temperament would be very crucial, PM said, for students going forward. And the number that we also shared earlier, just in a week of asking for recommendations and suggestions on the new policy, over 15 lakh suggestions have come from the teaching fraternity, who will play a crucial part when we talk about the implementation of the National Education Policy 2020, of course in coordination with students, in coordination with parents and teachers. My colleague Arun Sharma is joining us with more updates on Prime Minister's address that came in. Arun, if you look at Prime Minister's address, the focus seems to be on making it more fun, making it more integrated and taking it away from the world of just mark sheet, assessment and the pressures of examination that we talk about.
Good afternoon, Shubhendu, and of course, that's right. So the National Education Policy focuses more on progress card rather than a report card.
Yes.
The intent of the National Education Policy is to transform the intent and the content of the current education system that we are seeing as of now. So yes, Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlighted, and just to sum it up the entire address, the focus was on how can we impart practical knowledge to the students rather than giving theoretical knowledge to the students. Only report card, marks can't decide the fate of the student, can't decide or can't be evaluated on that basis. So right. Yes, when we're talking about the National Education Policy, and let's try to understand this way, Shubhendu, that the last 3.5 decades, there was no education policy as such. I mean, last education policy that came was in 80s. So yes, in the last 3.5 decades, when technology is changing rapidly, the global human resource requirement is changing rapidly. Now, after the consultation with various stakeholders and educationists and of course academicians in last 4.5 years, now the country has the National Education Policy, which primarily focuses upon flexibility of the education system. That means a student who wants to learn mathematics and music together, he can opt for that subject. If a student wants to learn a commerce subject along with a humanities subject, he can go ahead with that part. So it focuses upon flexibility. Second important part, it focuses upon languages, primarily the regional languages. More than 22 regional languages will be in focus. So the mode of teaching a student will not only be in English or Hindi or any other language, but it focuses upon the regional languages as well, so that language does not become a barrier as far as knowledge is concerned. Last but not the least, Shubhendu, the focus is on, treating a different student and evaluating different student in different manner. Yeah. Till now, the student from 1st standard till 10th standard were evaluated on one scale. So now the 5+3+4 structure. Yeah. So
I don't know. The point that you made about language, just wanted to add to that. Not only does it become easier for a young student to learn a new subject in the language he's already familiar with, a mother tongue, regional language, any language of the country, but it also, on the same time, celebrates the linguistic diversity of the country. And not just linguistic diversity, also skill diversity. We know about early introduction to vocational learning for students as well. So India's diversity is also finding space and celebration in the new policy.
Absolutely. So the main highlight over here, Shubhendu, is that we are trying to integrate globally as well, but we are not actually forgetting our regional roots as well. So yes, knowledge is important. Mode of language is not important. So that's the big takeaway as far as the National Education Policy is concerned. And yes, last but not the least, Shubhendu, it also focuses upon modernization of the entire education system in making the entire education or the knowledge process more fun-loving. So Prime Minister said that there are various stakeholders as far as students' education is concerned. So this education policy also upgrades those stakeholders, be it teachers, be it the student infrastructure, or be it the parents in the current scenario. So all these stakeholders as far as education to the students are concerned, all these also be upgraded as far as the National Education Policy is concerned. And that's the reason we are calling, or primarily Prime Minister Narendra Modi is calling this education policy as a holistic approach as far as development of a student is concerned, so that we can become a global hub as far as a knowledge hub innovation hub, research hub, of providing a quality human resources to the world. That's what we are focusing upon as of now via this national education policy.
Absolutely, and the stakeholders, Arun, will have to work with a greater pace. Prime Minister also put a date, 2022, by the time a new curriculum based on the National Education Policy 2020 will be ready.
Absolutely. So yes, what has happened is now government, after taking into consideration or after various discussion with various stakeholders, now has announced this education policy. So now gradually, I mean, various states have also announced and notified the education policy. So now the ball is in the game of the states now as to how they implement the national education policy. And after the implementation and successful implementation of education policy in all the states, the focus will be on the curriculum part as to how actually this education policy is, highlights reach to the far-flung areas, reach to the tier 2 town, tier 3 town, the students who are studying in villages. We have seen some high qualified schools in metro cities like Delhi, Bengaluru, Mumbai, but how can the same level of education can reach the villages as well? So yes, the new curriculum will be in place before 2022, and that's the focus of the government as well.
Right there, Arun, thanks very much for joining us with those inputs. And we're heading for a short break in Midday Prime. Lots more coming up. Do stay with us.
कैसे उठ खड़े हैं हम, आपके योगदान से बढ़ रहे हैं हम। मुश्किलों के दौर में भी खुद पर निर्भर हैं, स्वास्थ्य सर्वोपरि कर योद्धा से लड़ रहे हैं हम। नव भारत की ताकत बन रहे हैं हम। इन चुनौतियों में भी रुका नहीं विकास, डटकर खड़े रहे रक्षक हमारे, पूरी हो रही है जीतने की आस। आत्मनिर्भर भारत बना रहे हैं हम, आपके योगदान से बढ़ रहे हैं हम। आपका दिया गया आयकर भारत को देता है हर पल ताकत। अपने अग्रिम कर की दूसरी किश्त अदा करें 15 सितंबर 2020 तक, क्योंकि प्रत्येक आयकर दाता है राष्ट्र निर्माता।
Welcome back. You're watching Midday Prime. Let's now move on to our developing story. Let's talk about India and China. Now, India and China have agreed to not allow differences to become disputes over a long bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the SCO Council for Foreign Ministers meeting in Moscow. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi had a frank and constructive discussion on the developments in the India-China border areas as well as India-China relations, said a joint press statement issued following the eagerly awaited meeting. Now, during this meet, India maintained that recent incidents in eastern Ladakh has inevitably impacted the developmental and bilateral relationship between the two countries. Therefore, an urgent resolution of the current situation was in the interest of both the nations. In the meeting, sources said that Indian side highlighted its concern at the massing of Chinese troops with equipment along the line of actual control, LAC. The presence of such a large concentration of troops was not in accordance with the 1993 and 96 agreements and created flashpoints along the LAC. Also, the Chinese side has not provided a credible explanation for this deployment, India said. India has underlined that the provocative behavior of the Chinese troops at numerous incidents of friction along the LAC also showed disregard for bilateral agreements and protocols. Both sides agreed that immediate task is to ensure comprehensive disengagement of troops in all the friction areas to prevent any untoward incident in the future. The final disposition of the troop deployment to their permanent posts and phasing of the process are to be worked out by military commanders. The two ministers agreed that both sides shall abide by all the existing agreements and protocol on China-India boundary affairs, maintain peace, tranquility at the border areas, avoid any action that could escalate matters. And now let us take forward with the discussion. My colleague Abhishek Jha is joining us with some more inputs. Also joining us is a special guest, Sushant, strategic expert, senior fellow Observer Research Foundation. Welcome to both of you. Abhishek, quickly, if I can get an input from you about the key takeaways from the foreign ministers meeting. The outcome seems to be positive, but what are the tangible outcome way forward?
The tangible output should be considered as a matter of fact that both sides have agreed to release a joint statement that itself says something is positive about this meeting when the leadership wants to engage and not confront each other at the borders. The good thing is that both sides have agreed to the fact that there should be disengagement, there should be distancing about troops, and all those friction point areas should be.
Abhishek, we seem to have lost your audio. We'll connect with you again. Mr. Sushant Shireen, welcome to the program. If we can connect with you now. Now, the outcome, the press statement reads rather positive, but there is a sense of deja vu that we've sort of heard this before, such an outcome, such a statement before, especially from the Chinese side, talking about disengagement, talking about respecting each other's positions. How do you assess the outcome of the foreign ministers meeting, especially given the changed circumstances in both the nations?
Look, I am quite skeptical about what's come out of the meeting. I agree with Abhishek that the one positive thing to come out of the meeting is that you've called it a joint statement. The problem, however, is that while both sides call it a joint press statement, both sides have different interpretations of what happened in the meeting. And if you look at the readout given by the Chinese, it has all the 5 elements that the Indian External Affairs Ministry has put out. And yet there are some rather disturbing things which the Chinese have said in their readout. And in fact, they have left the whole thing so ambiguous that it can be interpreted the way they want it to be interpreted as to what exactly happened in the meeting. So clearly, while this is a joint press statement, there's a lot of things which are disjointed about this press statement. So that is one part of the problem. The other is that even on the issues on which both sides seem to have reached an understanding, that 5-point formula or whatever you want to call it, the problem is that the devil will be in the detail. How will that be operationalized? These are nice, highfalutin constructs that have been used. There's great diplomacies which is there in these 5 points. But how do these actually translate on the ground? What does it mean on the ground? When, for example, the Chinese, I have the Chinese readout in front of me, when they say that important to move back all personnel and equipment that have trespassed. Now, who has trespassed? That's a fundamental problem. We claim that the Chinese have trespassed. They say that we have trespassed. They say that we fired the bullets. We say that no, we did not do any such thing, that it was you guys who did this. We have asked and not got an explanation as to why the Chinese forces moved in the numbers and in the threatening manner they did, while there was no provocation from our side. So clearly those issues need to be thrashed out. And finally, the most disturbing thing is that when the Chinese, say that the Indian foreign minister said that India's policy towards China has not changed, clearly it has changed. The kind of measures that this government has taken, fairly strong measures, that does say that India's policy on China has changed. And then even more egregious is the Chinese reference that the Indian side does not consider the development of India-China relations to be dependent on the settlement of boundary question. Again, there is a bit of ambiguity in this formulation because while India has said that yes, we must not let this enter into the larger boundary question, enter into the other aspects of the relationship, the fact of the matter remains that the External Affairs Minister has on umpteen number of occasions said that this kind of Chinese behavior of nibbling away at territory, the salami slicing approach, cannot be allowed anymore. And clearly that if this is going to happen, then it will affect the other aspects of the relationship. So either the Chinese are in denial, or they are smoking something which they should not be smoking, and then formulating statements on the basis of that.
Right. Abhishek, I hope you're connected now. Now, if we were to read between the lines, as we mentioned earlier, that talks about disengagement has been made earlier, but when on the one hand at the border from the Chinese side there's build-up of troops, how do we then understand the rhetoric of disengagement?
Okay, so as Sushant said that there has been ambiguity in certain parts of the statement because as the statement goes by saying that there should be, there was no credible explanation why Chinese have put and amassed so much of arms and armaments along the borders. Also, while India has maintained that the policy towards China has not changed, the foreign minister has explained to China that the situation along the border which has happened in the recent time, it has affected the bilateral relations, and it is in the interest of both the nations that the situation is sorted and resolved as soon as possible, because the longer it stays, the sourer it will become. So this is the crux that the both party wants to convey to each other also. Meanwhile, we'll have to see how these 5-point agenda, 5-point formulation that has been agreed between the two foreign ministers translates on to the ground, because so far we have seen reports of both troops having come so close to each other that they have come almost in the firing ranges of each other. Both sides are trying to deploy troops in a mirroring situation to each other. So until unless those disengagements happen on the ground, these talks at the leadership levels will not yield the desired outcomes. And probably this is what both sides are trying to convey.
Right. Mr. Sareen, you know, troops of two countries can engage or disengage at the orders of their leaders. But what takes a lot of time is building of trust between the two countries. The trust deficit that has come in and that has strained the relations. And when the leaders talk about confidence building measures, what those confidence building measures are going to be, because we see a little back and forth. The troops disengage, Chinese troops go back, then again they return, they try to be the aggressor. So this back and forth seems to be defining China's recent policy. What should be India's stance, and what happens to the trust, a building of trust between the two nations?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question, because the one thing which has suffered the most, apart from the general relationship, is the trust between the two countries. I think that chasm is unbridgeable at this point in time. So for both sides to say that once this matter is diffused, we will undertake more confidence building measures, I think the single most important thing is to realize that the confidence building measures that had been taken earlier, the understandings and agreements that had been reached earlier, have been egregiously violated by the Chinese side. So one is that, and what is the guarantee that the Chinese will not do something similar going forward? So that is one point. The other thing is that, to my mind now, the only real confidence building measure that can come about is a delineation of the line of actual control, which means that until and unless that happens, and that is not something which is going to happen overnight, it will take torturous negotiations. If both sides pledge that the forces will stay where they are, they will not either fire at each other and not transgress into each other's territory, I think that would be the largest confidence building measure that you can undertake at this point in time. Otherwise, I think the trust deficit is so much that whichever side, or even if both sides withdraw, I think the kind of forces that have been amassed on either side of the LAC are likely to stay in place, because neither side trusts that the other side will not violate whatever agreements have been struck. Now, how do you bridge that? The only way you can do it is by delineating the line of actual control, something which the Modi government has been pressing for right from the time they came into power in 2014. And the Chinese have been balking at the prospect of, even exchanging maps. They haven't even done this, and one reason why they don't do this is because their maps and their claim lines keep changing. Tomorrow, for all you know, they might invent a 30-yard line, a 30-dash line, and take Delhi and say that there were some goddamn Chinese who came to India 3,000 years back, so Delhi is also part of China. How do you protect yourself against an expansionist power like the Chinese when they indulge in these kind of activities? So clearly, until and unless there is a delineation and both sides agree to it, I don't see what other confidence building measure can work at this point in time.
Absolutely. And Mr. Sareen, finally, we all want peace, but what lessons has India learned vis-a-vis its neighbor, especially in the past few weeks? How significant, while we are engaging with them in a diplomatic fashion through that medium, how significant is also defense preparedness? Just yesterday we saw Rafale becoming a part of Indian Air Force, so that preparedness is going to be crucial for India going forward.
Look, I lost you a little bit in between, but from what I understand on what lessons we have learned, I don't know if we have learned any lessons, because we keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. We have not realized the kind of neighbors we have both to our west as well as to our north and east. Both are treacherous neighbors, both are extremely cunning, and both believe in stabbing you in the back. Now, what more evidence do you need of your past history to understand this simple fact of life? And yet, if you keep placing your trust in these kind of characters and then say that we have been betrayed, our confidence has been shattered, then I think we are to blame for what has happened, not they. And until and unless we wake up and smell the coffee, we understand how important national security is, how important defense modernization and defense preparedness is, how a strong defense is also a guarantee of a strong economy, how social welfare schemes as well as defense preparedness as well as economic growth need to move in tandem. We will continue to make the same mistakes that we are making right now. We need to free our economy, we need our economy to grow, and we need to stop falling for all the turkeys and lemons which both our neighbors on the west and the east keep selling us, and every time we buy it, we are like that typical guy who keeps getting seduced by these fancy schemes, pyramid schemes, and then finally starts crying that he has been looted. I think we need to avoid this. We need to understand, and whatever lessons we might have learned, this
right there,
from now, another government from now, these lessons will be forgotten. What lesson did we learn after 1962? And why, if we had learned any lesson, why did we place so much trust that the Chinese will not, stab us in the back whenever they get a chance? So what more lessons do we want to learn? I think we've learned all the lessons, but somehow we seem to keep forgetting them.
All right, there, Mr. Sareen, appreciate you joining us and sharing your perspective. Also, thank you, Abhishek, for joining us with those updates. Moving on to our National Prime segment now. A special court today rejected the bail plea of Rhea and her brother Showik, arrested by the NCB Narcotics Bureau in connection with a drugs-related case pertaining to the death of actor Sushant Singh Rajput. The court also rejected the bail plea of 4 other accused in the case. The court has given order on the bail plea application of Rhea Chakrabarti. Let's now connect with my colleague Yogesh, who's reporting from Mumbai, tracking all the developments. Yogesh, what is the latest that you can share with us? The court has rejected bail plea of Rhea Chakrabarti and others. Give us the details of what the court said, what happened in the court. Yogesh, can you hear me? My colleague Yogesh Sheetal reporting from Mumbai. Yogesh, can you hear me? If you can confirm that, give us the details of what happened in the court. All right, we'll just try and connect with Yogesh once again. Heading for a short break. When we return, we'll follow up with the story.
से उठ खड़े हैं हम, आपके योगदान से बढ़ रहे हैं हम। मुश्किलों के दौर में भी खुद पर निर्भर हैं, स्वास्थ्य सर्वोपरि कर योद्धा से लड़ रहे हैं हम। नव भारत की ताकत बन रहे हैं हम। इन चुनौतियों में भी रुका नहीं विकास, डट कर खड़े रहे रक्षक हमारे, पूरी हो रही है जीतने की आस। आत्मनिर्भर भारत बना रहे हैं हम, आपके योगदान से बढ़ रहे हैं हम। आपका दिया गया आयकर भारत को देता है हर पल ताकत। अपने अग्रिम कर की दूसरी किश्त अदा करें 15 सितंबर 2020 तक, क्योंकि प्रत्येक आयकर दाता है राष्ट्र निर्माता।
Welcome back. We again trying to turn to our story on Rhea Chakrabarti. Rhea Chakrabarti's bail plea has been rejected by the court. Also was rejected the bail plea of her brother and others. My colleague Yogesh, who's reporting on this story, is joining us from Mumbai. Yogesh, what happened in the court? Give us the details.
See, yesterday already the contentions from both the parties were deposed before the special court, a special NDPS court here, and today the bail was basically rejected. As far as the reason of as far as the reason of rejection, it I think let's wait for the complete copy will be coming out. Then we will be able to understand what are the ground. But as far as we can say at this point in time that NCB has been maintaining that NCB has a strong case against Rhea and Showik, because they were arranging finance, they were arranging procurement of drugs, and they were also directly involved in the entire syndicate. Also, the defense lawyer was maintaining that Rhea was not directly involved, and the statement that has been recorded by the NCP is not voluntary. So by the judgment it can be said that court was not fully convinced by the defense lawyer, and that's the reason all the bail pleas have been rejected. However, Satish Manisinte had also said that once the complete judgment, they will read he will read the complete judgment, and then he will decide whether the judgment would be challenged in the Supreme Court or not. So I think the statement would be issued by the defense advocate that will basically make it clear that whether the judgment would be challenged to the upper court or not. One thing also important, that recently the magistrate court had also rejected the bail application. So this is in fact the second time when Rhea Chakrabarti's bail application has been rejected. Apart from Rhea Chakrabarti, also Showik and also Shamal Miranda, Dipesh Sawant, Abdul Basit and Jad. All 6 accused, all 6 bail applications have been rejected today. Yeah.
Right, Yogesh, we know that this drug case complicates the larger case of Sushant Singh Rajput's death. What details can you share with us on the other main investigation about what led to the deaths of the famous actor?
Shubhendu, the main nodal agency in this case, as far as the FIR is concerned, the CBI is in fact investigating this case. However, the ED first FIR was registered by the Enforcement Directorate, and after that ED shared some retrieved social media chats with the NCB, and finally then the FIR was also registered by NCB. Now, what's about the line of investigation by the CBI and ED? That is not very clear as of now, because CBI had not said anything. Even CBI had recently issued a statement that saying that the agency and agency officials have not shared anything with the media as of now.
Right.
So this is very important thing. Apart from Enforcement Directorate front, so Enforcement Directorate is investigation is already underway.
Right.
A number of people are there under the scanner. So currently only on legal front only NCB is fighting this case in the court now.
Right, Yogesh, thanks very much for getting us those details from Mumbai. Moving on, let's get an update on COVID-19 situation from across the country. The recovery rate in the pandemic has reached 77.65%, the Health Ministry said. Total number of recoveries has reached 35,42,663 in the country. The constant increase in recoveries has ensured that the actual caseload of COVID-19 of the country is reduced and currently comprises only 20.68% of the total positive cases. Effective implementation of test, track and treat approach has led to higher recoveries and lower fatality. Currently, India's case fatality rate is at 1.67%. Those are the updates on India's fight against COVID-19. Moving on, Union Minister for Information Technology Ravi Shankar Prasad to release the second edition of ranking of state startup ecosystem in presence of his colleagues Piyush Goyal via video conferencing today. The State Startup Ranking Framework 2019 has 7 broad reform areas comprising 30 action points ranging from institutional support, easing compliances, relaxation in public procurement norms, incubation support, seed funding support, other areas like venture funding support, awareness and outreach. Now remember, India is home to the 3rd largest startup ecosystem in the world. Around 1,300 tech startups were started in the last year, with 7 startups entering the Unicorn Club. This led to creation of some 60,000 direct and 1.3 to 1.8 lakh indirect jobs in the country. The government has constantly worked towards making India a global startup hub. Various schemes like Startup India, Atal Innovation Mission, Mudra Yojana, others are also focused on it. A state startup ranking exercise was started in 2018 to encourage states and union territories for taking proactive measures, compete with one another towards strengthening the startup ecosystem for budding entrepreneurs. The first edition, the first state was Gujarat. That's ranked as the best performer. Other top performers were Karnataka, Kerala, Odisha and Rajasthan. As we speak, India ranks 3rd position in the startup ecosystem in the world. Around 1,300 tech startups were started last year. 7 startups entered the Unicorn Club in 2018. There's also creation of 60,000 direct and 1.3 to 1.8 lakh indirect jobs. There are different elements of it. Startup India, Atal Innovation Mission, Mudra Yojana foster states and union territories towards active startup ecosystem for entrepreneurs. Gujarat came up as the best performer in the early editions. Other top performers included Karnataka, Kerala, Odisha, Rajasthan. Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh today launched the website of Aero India Show 2021 via video conferencing. The 5-day event will be held in Bengaluru from February 3rd next year. Global leaders and big investors in the aerospace industry and think tanks from across the world are expected to participate in the 5-day-long event. The website will be hosting latest information about various events like seminars, CEOs roundtable to be held during the show, and other important information to facilitate exhibitors and visitors to plan their trip for the show. Aero India will provide a unique opportunity for exchange of information, ideas and new developments in the aviation industry. Now, the construction of new elevated stretch along the Seoni-Nagpur highway has come in for a lot of praise recently. This elevated stretch runs through the Panch Tiger Reserve, benefits not only humans in the region but also protects the wildlife, protect animals thriving around this National Highway 44. Let's take a look at this special report by our correspondent Taposh Bhattacharya.
For long there has been debate regarding development activities and preserving wildlife at the same time. But it seems a 16-kilometer stretch on the National Highway 44 over the Panch Tiger Reserve has provided answer to this conundrum. Construction of new elevated stretches along the Seoni-Nagpur highway has been making waves among the conservationists. This elevated stretch runs through the Panch Tiger Reserves, benefits not only humans in the region but also help protect animals thriving around the National Highway 44. Central India has been recognized as one of the regions with the highest potential for long-term tiger conservation in the country. Behold, India's first dedicated corridor for wild animals at Panch Tiger Reserve, which is a classic example of mitigation measures undertaken to reduce wild animal mortality and vital for the long-term viability of tiger population in the central Indian landscape. Along a 16.1 kilometer length of the National Highway 44 passing through forest adjoining the Panch Tiger Reserves and intersecting the Panch Navagaon Nagzira Tiger Corridor, 9 animal crossing structures were constructed. Thanks to the country's first and largest dedicated underpass for animals in the world. These corridors have been fitted with the CCTV cameras to monitor the movement of animals.
These underpasses represent a one of the most interesting examples of the conservation and the development, where the road building agencies are able to make a road, a 4-lane highway, and the developmental and for the conservation, these mitigation measures have been proposed along this highway. There are more than 20,000 kilometers of roads which pass to the protected areas, and these mitigation measures on NH7 is just the beginning.
9 crossing structures, including 5 animal underpasses and 4 minor bridges, have been created. 18 wild animal species were found using these underpasses. 7 species of small mammals were also found to use the structures. These included Indian hare, jungle cat, which are the most frequent user of the underpasses, and the rare rusty spotted cat. Among the wild ungulates, the 5 major species, spotted deer, gaur, nilgai, sambar, and wild pig, were found to use the structures. Tiger, leopard, wild dog, sloth bear, and jackal, the major carnivore species in the landscape, were found using the structures with varying frequencies. A total of 89 tiger crossings were recorded from 6 of the 9 structures by 11 individual tigers. The structures are located along a 16.1 kilometer section of the highway that cuts across tiger reserves and adjoining forest. These underpasses has the potential to be a game changer for a country like India, which is trying to achieve sustainable development goals. With cameraman Mohit Joshi, this is Taposh Bhattacharya, TD India.
Human and wild learning to live next to each other. Moving on, today's birth anniversary of Acharya Vinoba Bhave. Swami Vivekananda also delivered his address in Chicago on this day in 1893. Prime Minister Modi, in a series of tweets, remembered these two great personalities. He said, "These great men have a lot to teach the entire humanity." Prime Minister, in another message, remembered the 9/11 attack. PM Modi, in a tweet message, said, in a quote, "The world remembers 9/11 for the dastardly attack on this day in the US. If only humankind had walked on the path of Jai Jagat given by Acharya Vinoba Bhave and Swami Vivekananda's message of universal brotherhood that he gave in 1893, the destruction that followed would not have occurred." And time now for all the updates from the world of business and finance. Let's take the stock from the market. Domestic equity benchmark Sensex jumped over 100 points in early trade on Friday. 30-shared BSE index was trading 114.64 points, or 0.30% higher at 38,954, while the NSE Nifty rose 32.45 points, or 0.28% to 11,481. Meanwhile, the rupee depreciated 9 paise to 73.55 against the US dollar in the opening trade today, tracking muted domestic equities. The local unit opened at 73.50 at the interbank forex market, then lost ground and touched 73.55 against the US dollar, down about 9 paise over its last close at 73.46. Let's now find out what's making news across the globe. We first look at updates on COVID-19 front from across the world. Over 2 crore 83 lakh coronavirus cases have been reported worldwide, with over 9 lakh 13,000 casualties. As many as 2.03 crore people have recovered to health from the virus so far. The United States continues to be the top of the list amongst the worst hit by the pandemic so far, with the highest number of infections. US has over 65.88 lakh cases of coronavirus, with death toll of over 1.96 lakh. In terms of the death toll, the US is followed by Brazil, which has recorded over 1.29 lakh casualties so far. Brazil currently has 42.39 lakh cases of the infection. And World Health Organization (WHO) has stressed that AstraZeneca's pause on experimental vaccine for coronavirus after illness of a participant is like a wake-up call. It should not, however, discourage researchers. Governments are desperate for a vaccine to help the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused more than 9 lakh deaths and global economic turmoil. WHO had earlier flagged AstraZeneca as being developed with Oxford University as the most promising vaccine candidate. However, drug maker suspended late-stage trials on its potential vaccine this week after a participant in Britain reported to be suffering from symptoms associated with a rare spinal inflammatory disorder. And time now for all the action from the world of sports. In women's singles, Serena Williams was beaten 1-6, 6-3, 6-3 in the semi-finals by Victoria Azarenka, denying her chance of winning a record qualifying 24th Grand Slam singles title on home soil. This year, Belarusian Azarenka will play Japan's Naomi Osaka in the third final at the Flushing Meadows on Saturday, having lost the previous two to Williams in 2012 and 2013. The semi-final win was Azarenka's first ever win against Serena Williams at the US Open. Earlier, number 4 seeded Naomi Osaka beat Jennifer Brady 7-6, 3-6, 6-1 to reach her second US Open final. Osaka took the first step to 7-6, chasing her down. Brady it came back and won the second set with 6-3. But Osaka did not miss any chance to reach her second US Open finals and breaks Jennifer Brady in the third set to take a 3-1 lead. And Croatia's Mate Pavic and Brazil's Bruno Soares captured the US Open men's doubles crown with a 7-5, 6-3 win over 8 seeds Wesley Koolhof of the Netherlands and Nikola Mektic of Croatia on Thursday. In their first Grand Slam men's doubles final as a team, Pavic did damage with his powerful serve, while Soares did well to force their opponents into difficult shots and sealed the win when Mektic sent a backhand volley into the net. The Croatian-Brazilian duo's road to the final was far from routine as they rallied from breakdown in the third set of their first round clash, and then in the second round had to stand tall as their opponents tried to serve for the match. And with that, we conclude this edition of Midday Prime. News and updates continue after a short break. Namaskar.